Hey, I'm Sarah Gonzalez. Welcome to the news and why it matters. Really quickly, we have Andrew Heaton is back. Yay! And we have Graham Allen. Yay! Graham Allen, CRTV, Grand Nation.
Correct.
Go find him there. It's really good stuff. Stu, what is the top story for you?
The election is apparently tomorrow. We should talk about it.
What?
Oh,
tomorrow?
I think we should talk about it.
Sure. It's not important, though.
It's not that.
We would be the only ones.
Yeah.
I should register to vote.
She's registered to vote.
Yeah. She's later. Jason.
The sweet sounds of sanctions, they are popping. And I'll tell you what that means.
Oh, all right. Sanction again. Okay. Andrew.
The two-party system is largely an illusion. I'm going to peel that back.
And Graham.
I want to talk about SNL attacking a wounded veteran.
All right. Okay, lots to get into. Want to thank our sponsor, Brick House. Sue got like -2 hours of sleep last night.
That's true.
Did you take your dawn to dust?
I did not, because I did not have it with me, which was a huge mistake.
That was
So I'm struggling today. I will say we were on tour this past week, and there were no vegetables to be seen. They did not exist.
Really?
This is why the Field of Greens thing is a good call, I would say, because you can just put it in anything and get your actual vegetables, and you can actually have some healthy stuff. You can mix it in with like the Monte Cristo sandwich or giant grilled cheese that you have.
If you're thinking for a second that Field of Greens somehow canceled out all of the junk you had on tour, I don't think that's true.
I feel like it did. I feel like it did cancel it out.
There's a healthy Monte Cristo sandwich that you added it to.
I'm sure, right?
You're fine.
However, well, I don't recommend putting it on top of a Monte Cristo sandwich, but I do recommend mixing 1 full scoop in water or milk or a smoothie. And you get, juice. You get one full serving of organic fruits and vegetables. It's delicious. And then your wives don't have to nag you to eat your vegetables. So it's a win-win.
Or your Sarah's.
Or your Sarah's. You can go to brickhouseblaze.com. Use promo code GREENS for 15% off of your first order, or you can text GREENS to 41411. Stu, election update.
We just did an election update. If you happen to see this, if you can go back and watch it.
We weren't watching. We don't watch you.
I appreciate that. I filled in for Glenn. And we did the election preview. Thank you, Graham. And we have a lot of election coverage tomorrow, which we're all here for, right? You guys are all.
Yep.
It's going to be a fun night. But we're looking at where we stand right now. You know, we could see anything from there is a scenario where the Democrats do really well in this thing and could theoretically take both House and Senate. Pretty unlikely they're going to take the Senate. I think the same thing goes for Republicans to take the House. I mean, it's not incredibly likely, but both are all realistic possibilities. Going through the Senate, I think, is particularly interesting because, if you think Cruz holds on in Texas, which I gotta feel he does. I mean, I'm just not a Bob Frank O'Rourke guy, but I do think he'll probably hold that. And I think Blackburn will probably win Tennessee. Now, they're both favorites in those races. If those two things happen, you have the Senate control for Republicans. That's how simple it is for Republicans. Their math is awesome. This is the best math I've ever seen for any party in a Senate election. They start without anybody being elected, just people who are in their seats without anything going on. 42-23 advantage for Republicans to start the night. Now, of course, there's a lot of like Bernie Sanders type races where they're definitely going to win and pick up seats there. But it's pretty hard for them to get to 51. They can get to 49, but that means sweeping all of these toss-up races, like Arizona, which I think a Republican's going to win in Arizona. I think there's a good chance the Republican wins in Missouri as well. I think Hawley has a good chance there. Nevada, Florida, Montana is a possibility for Republicans to pick up. They could get as high as I think 56 or 57 in a best case scenario, but my gut says it's probably a 52 or 53 type of seat situation for Republicans. As far as the House goes, it's the opposite. I mean, the math is completely stacked the opposite way, where in the House there are about 30 toss-up seats that are right in the middle here. And Democrats have to win 8 of them to take the House. That's a real oversimplification. We all know that both sides will pick off a couple of weird ones that we're not seeing, but that's generally what we're looking at here.
And are most of them leading in those polls?
Those are like pure toss-ups. Within 1 point could go either way. So the Republicans can win those toss-up races, right? Like if they can just win toss-up races, if they can pick off a couple races where they're down by 2 or 3 points, Republicans don't need to win races where they're down by 10 or 12. It's not like a desperation situation, but you just find that you're watching these elections, there's always a few that you don't expect. There's always a few that you should win that you don't. And for them to be that consistent over an entire night really will probably only happen if there's a very consistent polling error in their favor. I kind of hope that there is, because I would much rather have them have control than Democrats. But it's not necessarily something that you can expect. I think it's about the experts seem to think it's about a 15% chance for either one to happen. Democrats to take the Senate or Republicans to control the House. And I think that's kind of the state of affairs. There's a lot of intrigue, I think, on individual races kind of mixed in there, as well as, when we go to the governor. I think in Georgia is going to be really interesting to watch. But I think you get those early states, and we'll do this tomorrow. We'll have a bunch of kind of key races that will give us a sense of what the climate is. You never know until those votes start coming in, what the climate is of that night. We watched in 202016 when those first races started coming through.
We're going to be wrapped up at 6 p.m.
Yeah, I know.
It was unbelievable to watch.
It seemed that, Sarah, I remember you being there, and we're watching this, and as people are like, there was a moment where it was like, this Trump thing isn't happening. Where do we go from here? Where do Republicans go from here? And we're looking at the board, and I'm like, he hasn't lost any of the states that he needed to lose for this to be over.
We just kept going, okay, we'll wait for it.
Well, wait for it. It's going to happen.
Which state? Yeah.
One of my best memories was Leon, because he's like the numbers guy. He's like, calm down. It always works this way in Florida. You give it to this time here, and then you'll see that they're taking it. And he was like, huh. He was like,
we all had our. It was an amazing thing to watch, and you didn't know that. I mean, the polling didn't show that. There's this it's an environment, right? Like polling could kind of tell you what would happen in a certain environment. So if the environment is going to be a very pro-Republican environment, you can kind of see these things playing out, and it'll be very good. You could see early on, if you see like Joe Manchin winning by 10 or 12 points, if he holds that into a big lead in West Virginia, if you see, Florida going to Nelson pretty easily by 5 or 6, that's this type of environment where you could see a challenge at that Republican Senate. But it's a heavy lift for them.
Does it really matter if Democrats take the House? I mean, Republicans have had the House; they've done nothing with it.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about.
And then also, but then
they're going to target Trump.
So that's the one thing. Stu, is impeachment a probability at that point? I mean,
I think they can't controlling the House by a couple of seats. There's not. It's going to be tough to find the appetite, I think, for impeachment. They're going to need to have a big night. If they have a big night, they win. Like there's a good in the realm of possibilities. It ranges. The most likely possibilities range from Republicans winning the House by 1 seat to Democrats holding it by 71 seats. All of the Democrats are playing on plus territory. Right? They're on the right side of the field here. So the circumstances could play out that way. If they get to 60, 70 seats, if there's a blue wave type of election, I think for sure the impeachment stuff will go on.
Have there been that many that have actually declared they're in favor of impeachment? I don't know the exact numbers. I mean, they're going to get most volume. Maxine Waters is going to get more attention than the other people.
Yeah.
I would say that, in effect, from an autistic libertarian perspective, that you get.
You said it, not us.
Yeah, I'm just sitting next to you. The only time we ever get a slowdown in the spending of growth is when there's a divided Congress with the White House. If there's the same party in the White House and in Congress, every time.
Sadly true.
They just for Republicans, they're going to blow a lot more money on their programs that they like, defense and everything else. Democrats, same thing. The only time they ever just slow it is when it's divided.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think Gary Johnson has a chance at all? I know you're excited about it.
I think he'll come in second. I don't know that he'll take it. I hope he does, though.
In New Mexico.
Very, very
He's competitive. I mean, he's going to have the highest percentage of any libertarian, I'm sure, countrywide. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see tomorrow. Jason, sanctions.
Yes. So the sanctions were reimposed today. Actually, the hardest hit ones on Iran. There was a few more like a few months ago, but the most impactful just snapped back into effect today. Those include all of the sanctions on their oil and gas sectors, their banking. I mean, this is like hardcore stuff. Not only were all the sanctions that we rescinded from back during the JCPOA, but they also snapped in 300 additional entities, people, stuff like that. So this is the hardest sanction package that I think we've ever had on Iran. And it's just kind of, okay, so a few more details about that. So we did exclude, I think, eight countries from fully saying you cannot, buy Iranian oil and gas. Some of those are like China, India, places that got most of their oil from Iran. But supposedly, we're giving them a certain amount of time to scale that back, over time, so they can wean themselves off. Some people have said that we've actually made deals with China to say you're going to take more oil from us. So it could be good. The problem is that we don't even really know the actual the details of that agreement. So that could happen. That might not happen. Who knows? The majority of the world has jumped on. We've already restricted their barrels per day to 1 million barrels per day, which is pretty significant. I think they only produce about 3 million barrels per day right now. So 1 million is a huge chunk off their pocketbook, and that's only going to keep adding up. One of the things on this which is interesting to me, is they say that they said that the world will never be able to get the sanctions that we did have if we just cut the scrap the deal and moved on. That was one of Obama's administration's biggest talking points. Yeah. We'll never get that again. And some of the countries in Europe have already said, look, we're not supporting this. We're still keeping the agreement intact. I think that was France, Germany, people like that. They've even gone as far as to condemn it in the public and even create this system, this secondary banking system, to where they can kind of bypass the American system and then do transactions directly with Iranian companies so that they don't get in trouble. The problem is that that's all just talk. It's all just talk. The rhetoric from the Obama administration was ludicrous. Of course, these companies, they don't want to be cut off from the American financial system. They don't want that. They have no choice but to comply. Now, even if you have a country in France that says wants to buy oil from Iran, well, that country, because of how ridiculously huge our reach is financially, they're going to be doing some kind of business with American companies. Secondary sanctions will then go into effect, and those companies will not be able to deal with those organizations anymore. So eventually, those sanctions will hit people if they stay in. Every organization, company knows this. Everyone, with a few exceptions, will have to pull out as well. So the sanctions will pretty much go back to the way they were when we had everyone signed on. The only difference is, and that's what kind of the subterfuge of some of these European countries. They know this, but they also don't want to say, hey, we lied about it. We support President Trump. We're just kind of going along with the United States. They're going to have to anyway. It's just that their public face is that they're standing up against us. Yeah. But anyway, so it's a good day. It's kind of ridiculous that we're the only ones that have to stand up to the world state sponsor of terror. It's just insane. And that everyone's kind of pretending, and the world's pretending that Iran's not doing some of these things. But I do believe this will put a lot of pressure on the Iranian regime, and we'll see how long. Last time sanctions went into effect, it was very, very quick.
They did have effects. I'm usually very skeptical on sanctions, but Iran did actually kowtow a little bit.
It was surprising.
Yeah. But I will add, it did have international backing, and de jure international backing when that happened last time. I'm generally skeptical of sanctions. I do think if they're targeted, they can be useful, targeted to specific people. I think if you target the whole country, I think it's more likely just to anger everybody in there and make them more anti-American. I don't know that it actually works its way up to the guys at the top. But what you can do, and they might have done in this round, is freeze any assets that the top 20 Iranians have in the United States, or put a travel ban on them, or that kind of thing. But if it's the whole country, I don't know that's going to necessarily have positive effects.
Really good point, because we talked to a guy, Glenn talked to a guy who was talking about how effective it was to sanction all these Russian oligarchs all at once, and all these Russians. And he said
that actually pisses them off.
It pisses them off, and it also galvanates them together. So what he said was, what you should do is you should sanction these groups of oligarchs, give benefits and give opportunities to these sets of oligarchs, and let them put them against each other, let them eat each other, and eventually that's more effective. So that's a very good point.
All right, back in a minute. got a lot more to get into, but before we do that, I want to thank our sponsor, iTarget Pro. I am so excited. I got my iTarget Pro in, and we played around with it this weekend some more. It's so fun. Have you heard of this, Graham? Oh, my gosh. You would love it. I'm going to let fellow military man Jason explain to you what it is.
Is it what it basically sounds like, a target? Is that what it is?
Yes, but
It's a laser target.
there's more.
Laser
Wait,
target.
there's more.
You're about to totally geek out.
Okay.
So basically, what it is like you get this app, and they got this little target you can set up and set the distance however far you want. But then it uses your own weapon. So depending on whatever caliber you are, you have a 9mm, 40, 45, or whatever, and it gives you like a little round that you actually put in the chamber, and it's got like a little pin, like where the firing pin hits, and it shoots a laser. So like every time you press the trigger, it makes a little like laser mark or whatever on the target. So basically,
And it registers in the app, right?
Registers on the app, yeah.
Track of.
So instead of just dry firing or whatever, if you want to maintain your skills, or instead of going to the range and spending, you know how much ammunition it is. It's insane. You can do all this from your house. It's awesome.
I mean, I was literally doing it in my living room.
Do the
while I
one
was
thing
watching
that your
TV.
parents told you never to do.
Yes. And you're not destroying furniture, so it's great. It's a win-win.
Don't shoot that gun in the house.
Yeah. You can go to itargetpro.com. You can save 10% right now with promo code NEWS. It is absolutely worth the investment. itargetpro.com. Andrew, tell us about the tribes.
Yes, Real Clear Politics had a fascinating piece out. They've done a lot of polling over several thousand people. And what they came up with was a different way of organizing the voting blocks in this election and right now. I think we've talked before about kind of the way American politics is portrayed as a 50-50, you're one of two camps type thing. I find that very frustrating. I think it's kind of like if we tried to look at America as 100% Catholic or Protestant, and you're like, but I'm a Jew. And they're like, nope, you're Catholic on tradition, but you're Protestant on, and it's like, no, there's actually different ways of doing this.
Yeah.
So the way that they organized it was they broke it down into 5 blocks, 5 tribes that they had, right? The first one, #resistance. You can guess what that is. #resistance does not like Trump. It is hell-bent on the Democrats taking over, very anti-Republican. And then that was about a quarter of the electorate. The other quarter of the electorate was a coalition of 2 different kind of Republican-leaning groups. There was the MAGA hat people, who are very much in favor of Trump. Not that Republican in their leanings. When they polled them, they didn't find a huge amount of commonality with the GOP itself, but they really liked Trump. And they were joined by the other group of mainline Republicans who probably going to vote for Trump, probably support him, but less concerned about immigration, more concerned about taxes and religious liberty. That tended to be that group. They were older, whiter, more educated, or more college educated. And then after that, you had these 2 other camps that I thought were really fascinating. There was a group called the Detached, who don't have a specific, it didn't sound to me like they really had an ideological core. It was just they didn't like politics. They didn't like either team at all, and are probably the most apt to not vote because they're so disillusioned by it. And then the 5th one,
What percentage was that?
It was, I think, like 15%, something like that. Okay. And it tended to be very young. It was a lot of young people that just really didn't want anything to do with it. And part of me sympathizes with it, although it didn't, like, anything anti-two-party I'm going to enjoy. But there didn't seem to be like a real coherent agenda to it. I think it was more of just kind of general disgust. Yeah. And then the 5th group that they identified, they called them independent blues. And I think about 20 years ago, we would have called them Reagan Democrats. And it was a group of people that actually sounded very Republican on a number of things. They, like on a policy level, tended to favor education and some kind of gun control and that kind of thing. But when surveyed on, say, political correctness, were more apt to go with the Republicans and say, I think we're too overly politically correct, and really didn't like identity politics. And the reason that this matters, the reason I like this is I think that the constant hammering that we get from politicians and from the parties that there's 2 options is for their benefit and not ours. We're a lot more complex than that. We're a lot smarter than that. And I like any way of approaching this where we're able to look at different models that reflect that amount of ideas coming out of the American electorate. And it's not just the simple us versus them dichotomy that's portrayed.
So weird. Think about back to the last election, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. I mean, I remember what I thought a Democrat was or a Republican was back when I was a kid, back in the 80s. It's not at all what the definition is now. So like Donald Trump, he's not fiscally conservative, even though the GOP has technically been fiscally conservative.
Sort of. They would at least pretend to be.
They at least pretend to be.
Pretend to be.
Supposed to be, at least.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
Religious values, like things like that. But Hillary Clinton, she's more of an interventionist, really, than most Republicans are.
She could have hung out with McCain.
I mean, right? Like many of her what she is today, which to define the Democratic Party for so long, were like staples on the Republican side, and vice versa.
And the Iraq War is a great example of this, right? I mean, Hillary voted for it, and Trump did nothing. Almost always complained that it was a terrible thing, and they shouldn't have done it.
She also voted to expand a wall back when she was in the Senate.
Yeah, that's right.
There were a lot of things that actually.
We can't talk about that. We can't talk about that.
Like
you're talking
Bill
craziness
Clinton
now.
was the first one to even bring it up. I think Operation Gatekeeper down in California, build the wall was like the first. He was the one that brought that up.
Yeah. I'm definitely a big believer in the idea that these two parties, particularly Republican and Democrat, are just vehicles, right? They're vehicles for whatever to try to win elections, right? It's not. There's not an ideological base. There's not really a coherent thought. I mean, there have been times where there were, but that was just because that was the best way to win that election, right? And I think like now we see, people are like, oh, well, the Republican Party is changing. I think it's always, it's kind of always a mushy sort of undefinable thing. And
it's a coalition. Like we've in Europe, they have elections and then they have coalitions. So they'll have like 9 different parties. The Socialist Party, the Lawn Gnome Party. They'll all form a chunk and they'll form a coalition government to rule. In the United States, we don't have that. We've got 20 different tribes that are all kind of vaguely under one banner, and then they figure that out and then go and have the general election. So they have elections and then coalitions. We have coalitions and then we have elections.
Historically, just really quick, it's kind of interesting when you think about when the Whig Party ended up going away. And immigration was a really big sticking point when it did. And I think was it the Know Nothing Party?
Yeah.
That was the party that they were the ones that were like real hawkish on immigration, hated immigrants. They hated basically Irish and whatever it was back then. And then the Republican Party kind of sprang up, and that's the one that no one. But it's just interesting, the same exact issue now, and I wonder if immigration will be the same thing that will lead this split if it ever does.
That's a great point, Graham. SNL. I didn't realize people still watched SNL.
No, I don't. The only reason I found out is because this. So this is, SNL has done it again. Saturday Night Live for, those of us who have been around for a while.
And as you're introducing this, I think we do have this clip.
Okay, all right, yeah. So they've done it again. So it started off a couple weeks ago with Kanye West. Kanye West comes out and says, they were bullying me in the back to take the Make America Great Again hat off and stuff, which is, in my opinion, whatever. It's expected at this point. But this is why what they did this past episode on Saturday night irritates me, because now they're going after veterans. The guy who did it, I don't even know his name because it's not important enough for me to know, but the guy he did it to is Dan Crenshaw, a congressional candidate who just so happens to be a wounded veteran who just so happens to be a former Navy SEAL. Wounded to the point he's wearing an eye patch and everything, and that's what they attack. And, when we see the clip, he even goes as far to say, I know this guy lost his eye in Iraq or whatever. Or whatever. Yeah. Or what do you mean, or whatever? This man lost himself for you to go on TV and be an idiot. That's what this guy did. The only reason that you're able to be just this incompetent fool on TV is because this man put it all on the line for you to do this. Estimated 1.3 million veterans have paid the ultimate price for us to have our freedoms. CNN even comes on and completely goes, oh, no, you can't say. Do you know how many consecutively wrong decisions you've made for CNN to come on and basically say, have you lost your mind? You can't do that. But it just proves this utter disconnect that we have with our society and our younger generation. I don't know how old this guy is. I'm guessing he's in his 20s. Kind of thing, but this disconnect to realize the only reason that we have the ability to do what we do every single day is because of men and women like Dan Crenshaw. And for you to go on there and mock the very injuries that he has fighting for your freedoms, I think it just proves that we have a much bigger disconnect within our society above just politics.
Yeah, and did you see what Crenshaw responded with?
Yeah.
I loved his response.
It was great. It was great. Actually, let's play that really quickly if we can.
I want us to get away from this culture where we demand apologies every time someone misspeaks. Mm-hmm. I think that would be very healthy for our nation to go in that direction. We don't need to be outwardly outraged. I don't need to demand apologies from them. They can do whatever they want. They're feeling the heat from around the country right now, and that's fine. But I would like him and Saturday Night Live to recognize something, which is that veterans across the country probably don't feel as though their wounds they received in battle should be the subject of a bad punchline for a bad joke. And here's the real atrocity of all this. It wasn't even funny.
I love the way
he handled it really, really well.
Yeah, because, because when you're in that position, again, this is a guy who's a couple days before an election, right? Like, the temptation for any politician, right, is to say, well, I can take advantage of this. I can be the victim. Yeah. Exactly. And I love the fact that he rejected that. He was just like, you know what? Look, everyone knows that it was a really bad moment, and that shouldn't have happened. It was not a good idea. But the idea that he was like, you know what? Like, I don't think we need to be outraged. We don't need to be calling for apologies and boycotting and all this other stuff. Glenn's addicted to outrage, right? Like, we can reject the outrage and just let this go by. But it does at least focus attention on veterans and what they've had to go through. And it was a silly moment, certainly.
Shows the caliber of the character of Dan Crenshaw, in my opinion. Absolutely. The very man that you're going after responds that way. Yeah. It just shows what kind of a man you're actually attacking.
Yes, and he was on radio with Glenn this morning. If you guys want to check it out, you can listen to it on a podcast. Back in a minute. Don't forget, we are all going to be here tomorrow night. We're going to have the regular show, and then we're going to launch into election night coverage. Midterm 2018 should be a really good time. Graham is still going to be here. CRTV. We may be joined by some other people as well. And it's going to be a really great time, so we'll see you there, and we'll see you in overtime.